The Strait of Hormuz cannot be reopened. That is Iran's position as of today. Not a threat, not a negotiating chip. A statement of fact from Iran's foreign ministry, issued hours after the American president said his country has no time frame for ending this war. Read those two statements in the same breath. America has no deadline. Iran says reopening is not possible. Two governments, same day, telling the world the same thing from opposite sides. This war has no visible end from either direction, and Brent crude is holding above $100 a barrel, a level it crossed the moment Iran seized two ships in the strait and has not returned from since. The market is pricing in exactly what both governments just said out loud. What makes these two statements so significant when placed side by side is not the drama of either one individually. It is the picture they create together, and that picture has China at its center, not in the headline, not in the press briefing, but in the structure. In the reason Iran can say not possible and actually mean it, and in the reason America can say no time frame without lying. Here's what happened on the water. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Navy intercepted two container ships in the Strait of Hormuz. The first, a Panama-flagged Italian-owned vessel linked by the Revolutionary Guard to Israel. The second, a Liberian-flagged ship operated by a Greek company. Both were fired upon, boarded by armed Revolutionary Guard commandos with faces covered, and escorted to Iranian shores. A third vessel was struck by gunfire during the same operation. The Revolutionary Guard issued a statement immediately, and the specific language is worth noting carefully. Disrupting order and safety in the Strait of Hormuz is our red line. This was the first time Iran had seized foreign commercial vessels since the war began. Not threatened to seize. Seized. Oil crossed $100 a barrel on the news. Now here's the second critical piece. As of the time this was written, America had not formally responded to those seizures. There was no military briefing addressing the counter-seizure specifically. No White House statement calling it a ceasefire violation. The president's own spokesperson said he does not view Iran's seizures as a violation of the ceasefire. Not a formal military response, not a formal diplomatic protest through official channels. The blockade is still running. The ceasefire is still technically extended, and Iran has just demonstrated that it will seize any ship it chooses in the world's most important energy corridor during a ceasefire, hours after that ceasefire was extended. And America has said nothing specific about it. The third piece is the one connecting everything, and it is the piece that most coverage is not assembling correctly. The reason Iran felt confident enough to seize two ships on the same morning the ceasefire was extended is China. Not because China ordered the seizures, not because China is fighting alongside Iran, but because China has been doing something far more sophisticated than fighting, and understanding what China has been doing is the only way to understand how this war arrived where it is today. Start with what Iran actually did and what it means strategically. Seizing two ships is categorically different from attacking them. Iran attacked more than 20 confirmed merchant ships earlier in this conflict, firing on vessels, disabling them, turning them back. Those are tactical actions. They interrupt traffic and raise insurance costs, but they do not give Iran physical custody of ships and crews. Seizing is different. Seizing means Iran now holds two container ships against the will of the countries that own them. Panama called it a grave attack against maritime security. Italy's interests are directly implicated. Greece's shipping operators are directly implicated. One of the world's largest container lines has two of its named vessels in Iranian custody. This is a qualitative escalation beyond every previous Iranian maritime action in this conflict. What Iran is running is a counter-seizure strategy. America seized one Iranian ship earlier in the week. Iran responded by seizing two Western commercial ships. The arithmetic is deliberate. America takes one, Iran takes two, and the two are not Iranian ships. They belong to Western commercial operators whose governments are now compelled to respond diplomatically, creating a multi-country political problem for America out of a single bilateral military action. The Revolutionary Guard released video footage of its commandos approaching the vessel, opening fire, and boarding with weapons drawn. That footage was not made for American eyes. It was made for the boardrooms of every shipping company deciding whether to send vessels through the strait. 7 tankers crossed Hormuz in the 12 hours before the seizures. After footage of armed commandos boarding a container ship at gunpoint was released, that number was approaching 0. Satellite imagery published that same morning showed at least 33 Revolutionary Guard fast attack craft sailing north of the strait near the Iranian coast. Most are armed with short-range anti-ship missiles and artillery rockets. This is not a warning. This is Iran demonstrating that its naval capacity in the strait is intact and deployed, 54 days after America's own defense secretary said that capacity had been obliterated. America's silence in response is not confusion, and it is not weakness. America is simultaneously enforcing a naval blockade with more than 10,000 personnel and over a dozen warships, extending a ceasefire with no defined end date, trying to bring Iran back to a second round of talks that Iran has publicly refused, deploying a third carrier group currently heading to the Gulf, and watching China and Russia make strategic moves around the edges of this conflict that complicate every decision. In that context, formally labeling Iran's seizures a ceasefire violation creates an impossible problem. Call it a violation and retaliate and the ceasefire ends. Call it legal and back down. And Iran has demonstrated it can seize Western commercial ships during an American ceasefire without consequence. Either answer is worse than the silence. But the silence has a cost. Every shipping company in the world just watched Iran seize 2 ships and watched America say nothing specific about it. This is what can be called a confidence ladder. Every time Iran makes a move, and America absorbs it without a response that actually changes Iran's calculation, Iran gains a rung. The ladder has been building across 54 days. Iran closed the strait. America spent weeks unable to fully reopen it. Iran gave China and friendly nations passage while blocking Western ships. A Chinese tanker sailed through without consequence, and America said it was not a violation. Iran came close to a deal at a mediated summit, and then walked away. America extended the ceasefire with no deadline, and now Iran has seized 2 ships during that ceasefire, and America called it not a violation. The latter does not require Iran to be militarily superior to America. It requires Iran to learn, rung by rung, exactly how far it can push before America pushes back in a way that changes Iran's calculation. 54 days in, Iran has not found that rung. Now to China, because this is the part that requires the most precision. When Iran calculated that the consequences of seizing 2 ships were manageable, that calculation rested on a foundation. It rested on the knowledge that even if America escalates, Iran can absorb that escalation without collapsing economically. The reason Iran can make that calculation is China. Before this war, Iran was exporting roughly 1.5 million barrels of oil per day. During the most intense weeks of conflict, with the strait largely closed and American bombing at its peak, Iran's exports increased. How does a country that has had its supreme leader killed, its nuclear facilities bombed, and its military degraded across nearly 2 months of war, export more oil during the war than before it? Through China's dark fleet, through payments processed by second-tier Chinese banks outside the international banking network, through refineries that process sanctioned crude without documentation, through ship-to-ship transfers in international waters, through tankers with transponders switched off. More than 150 million barrels of Iranian crude are currently at sea, and the overwhelming majority are heading to China. The blockade cannot reach that system because American military operational language explicitly excludes vessels heading to non-Iranian ports, written specifically to avoid stopping Chinese tankers, because stopping them means a confrontation with China that America cannot afford before upcoming diplomatic meetings in Beijing. China's customs records show 0 imports from Iran since 2022, but China's recorded imports of so-called Malaysian crude run to more than 1 million barrels per day, which is more than double Malaysia's entire national oil production. The math does not work unless the oil is coming from somewhere else. It is coming from Iran, relabeled and transferred at sea. The system was built during the sanctions years. This war made it visible. There is also a confirmed military dimension. Leaked documents verified by multiple news organizations showed the Revolutionary Guard used satellite imagery from a Chinese commercial firm to target American military bases in the region. China helped Iran see where America was so Iran could strike those positions more accurately. When the president was asked about Chinese weapons transfers to Iran, he said he doubted it. His own intelligence community confirmed the transfers. That gap between what American intelligence knows and what the president is willing to say publicly is the space China has been operating inside for the entire duration of this conflict. And it is precisely that gap that gives Iran the confidence to seize 2 ships and watch America call it not a violation. China's strategy throughout this conflict is that of an absent profiteer. It benefits in 3 directions simultaneously without firing a single shot. Elevated oil prices increase the value of China's massive strategic reserve built from sanctioned crude before the war started. American strategic exhaustion depletes precision strike arsenals being used in the Persian Gulf, while China applies its military budget elsewhere. And if this war ends with the Strait under any framework that includes Iranian sovereign management, China, which already has a guaranteed passage arrangement with Iran, gains permanent preferential access to the world's most critical energy corridor. 6 months. That is how long the Pentagon told Congress it would take to fully clear the Strait of Iranian mines after any deal is signed, and no clearance operation begins before the war ends. Even if a deal were signed tomorrow, the Strait stays disrupted for half a year. Oil stays elevated. The global economy keeps absorbing the shock, and the confidence ladder keeps standing. America seized 1 ship. Iran seized 2. America called Iran's seizures not a violation. Iran called America's seizure piracy. If China is the reason Iran can make that argument from a position of genuine confidence, and more than 150 million barrels of crude heading to China is the reason, then the honest question to ask is this: what exactly is the ceasefire protecting?